most of these story type videos will be like long form. So like the previous one I made on Crohn's was like 26 minutes, and this one, which I'm going to be talking about my journey, I guess, like my experience with learning Japanese, will probably be like a similar length, probably even longer, to be honest. But what I'm going to try and focus on is more about the language aspect of things, because there's so much I can talk about with like personal experiences, my time in Japan, like writing the book, all sorts. But that video would just end up being like 5 hours long, so no one wants to watch a 5-hour video. So I think the best thing to start with is probably like, why did I decide to learn Japanese? Because that's the most common question I get, and like, to be honest, I give people a different answer every single time, because it just depends on the mood. And also, if I get actually into the real reason of why I started, it just never ends really. But one of the main reasons I use is the fact that I always wanted to learn a second language. I was surrounded by people in school that just couldn't actually speak a second language because of their upbringings, whether it was like Hindi, German, Norwegian, whatever. So I kind of had like, not a complex, but I had like I kind of wanted to have the same thing. Like, I wanted to be able to have a second language that I could speak. And I learned German in school, but obviously, as everyone knows, you never really properly learn a language in school. So yeah, that was a thing. And then I just decided on Japanese because it seemed like a fascinating language. Like, obviously everyone talks about it's the hardest language in the world, like it's impossible to learn, but I was thinking any language will take a while. If I'm going to learn a language, I might as well commit to one that's going to be worthwhile and interesting to me. So I never really was concerned about the difficulty of Japanese. But also I just the letters, the kanji, were just so fascinating to me. The fact that a language could be constructed of these like small little drawings. And I always liked art, and I loved drawing when I was younger, so I thought that's pretty fascinating. And then what else? Just the way it sounds so cool. I think everyone would agree with that. Like, it's just initially it's hard to comprehend that would be a language, like they're expressing thoughts. But then like like as I gradually got into learning the language and started to understand it more, it just made so much sense. Like, it's such a logical language. Yeah, and the other reasons I can think of are probably the fact that I did like Japanese media, so anything like anime. I hadn't actually really watched that much up until that point, but I thought, like, if I'm going to learn the language, I might as well watch anime as well. I love martial arts as well. I've loved martial arts from like a young age, so like karate, kickboxing, anything, jiu-jitsu, and a lot of martial arts obviously originated from Japan, so I thought that would be quite interesting. And then as I got into the language, I basically just discovered there's so much media, there's so many interesting things, so like it never ends, honestly. So that was one of the reasons why I actually managed to keep with it. But for example, like they have a great kickboxing scene in Japan. So many like really good athletes, like Takeru. Like, I could go on for days, but yeah, so that's one of the reasons. And then from there, like what was my first step? Like, what did I do first? So I basically just did what everyone does. Like, I bought some books. I bought Genki textbooks, and I just sat at my desk and I started like reading through them, and doing it the traditional way. So loads of traditional grammar study, and also Wanikani. I use like this app called Wanikani, which is good for like learning, well, supposedly good for learning vocab and kanji. And I literally did that for like a year. So that was quite a long ordeal, but I just didn't really get anywhere with it. So I just remember like it was really hard to keep motivation up for traditional study. So I'd probably only really end up doing like a few hours a week maximum, like 3-4 hours a week. And I'd have to like make a big deal out of it. So I'd make some matcha and get like the whole environment working so I can focus, but something didn't feel quite right at that point. So in my eyes, I kind of like wasted a year, but in retrospect, the fact that I actually managed to stick with it a year meant that I wanted to learn the language. Like, it was a long-term thing, and I wasn't really willing to give up on it. I think if I'd given up on it at any point in that year, I never would have got to where I am now. So that was something that I shouldn't take for granted. I started in COVID, when COVID kicked off. But after a year of that, I finally discovered something called AJATT. And a lot of people probably know what AJATT is. Like, it's a really common language learning method, I guess. I've gone down the worst route here. Oh my God. Oh well. So AJATT, the concept of AJATT is 10,000 hours of immersion and 10,000 sentence cards, essentially. So it's an immersion-based learning method. Loads of people have done it. Loads of people have got great success from it. It's a very extreme method, and you can really get dragged into it, and it can really control your life. And I've seen like some bad cases of it where it's all someone does, and they basically lose everything else that's going on in their life. So that was one thing that I had to deal with throughout my time doing AJATT. Something I did kind of like struggle with at times, but I think overall managed to keep a pretty good balance. But I just remember seeing like Katsumoto, the guy that made AJATT. I saw a video of him speaking in Japanese, and I was like, bro, this is the one. Like, this guy knows what he's doing. I'm gonna follow exactly what he did and try and get the same results. So yeah, I just started with AJATT, and I just went for it at the start. Like, I was adding like 50 Yankee cards a day, new cards a day. And because I had like some foundation from Wanikani, I knew some words that I could get straight into it. So basically I was doing like 3 hours of Anki a day, the whole summer, because this is after my second year had finished. So I didn't really have anything to do. I was just mining cards like all day. Some days I would get to like 10 hours a day because I was jobless at that point. So yeah. And then I guess it got to third year, and I really had to like focus in. So I'll talk about third year next. So yeah, third year of university, that is. So I really wanted to focus on AJATT at this point, but I knew I needed to get a balance right, because I'd seen some videos that people made on AJATT and the fact that it stunted emotional growth, like all sorts of bad stories. But I thought, if I'm gonna do this AJATT thing, I've got to get it right. So at that point I was dating someone as well, and I was doing Muay Thai a lot, so lots of training, and I was studying mechanical engineering at university. So I really just had to be as efficient as possible with my time and just find the hours in the day. So I can remember like it was serious. Like, I was waking up at 8 a.m, 7:30, just so I could get up and do my Yankee reps. And then I'd get all my university work done in the morning, do Anki, do immersion, and then go to a Muay Thai session. So yeah, that was pretty hard to keep the balance right. And I remember like my girlfriend at the time was not very happy about the amount of AJATT I was doing, because I was probably doing about like 5 hours of study a day, which is in AJATT terms is like really not that much at all. It's like quite it's on the lower side, I would say, but it was pretty efficient. And if I hadn't got that 5 hours done, like, I was not doing anything else. Like, I remember like even if I went around to her house, I'd have to stay in her living room and get it done before I could even chat to her. And in retrospect, that is like outrageously rude. It's not good, and I've definitely changed my mindset over the years. But what you got to realize at that point is, like, if you're hungry to get better at something, like, there's almost nothing stopping that. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people experience with something like AJATT, because it's by nature such an extreme thing. Like, it's the direct correlation between like the amount of hours you put in and how good you get. So if you're told that, you're going to want to put as many hours in as you can. So I would say one thing with everyone doing AJATT is like, just try and get a balance. It's really important. But yeah, so I continued that for about a year of maybe 5 hours a day, and then got around to fourth year. One thing that I actually did in fourth year, which I'd been putting off for couple of years at that point is I joined the University of Bristol Japan Society. So I really didn't want to join it before that point because I just didn't feel like my Japanese was at the point where I could have any meaningful conversations. And in retrospect, that doesn't really matter because I think I'd probably overshot it a bit. I was still able to converse with people. And the main point was that in the University of Bristol Society, most people are like half Japanese or English, or some are like full Japanese, but so most people speak in English anyway. Like every now and then it'll break into Japanese, but it's not really like I'm going to be establishing a Japanese conversation if they're trying to speak in English. So, but that was great because I met loads of people, loads of interesting people, like made some good friends, and that I'm still in touch with now. So, and that was great. And I actually met my ex-girlfriend there as well. So yeah, it was definitely worth joining that society. But at that point, my motivation in regards to like AJATT had dropped quite significantly. So I was basically on maintenance at that point. I was probably clocking like 3 hours of active immersion a day. But I wasn't doing any study at that point. I actually quit Anki at that point, about 1.5 years into it. But within 1.5 years, I'd got to about 10,000 cards or like 12,000 cards, and they were all pretty well learnt. So I basically like smashed the Anki out and then just quit it as soon as I could because I'd basically got sick of it. But I don't think there was any negative effects of that because at that point I was quite I'd learnt all the words from it and I could just like fully immerse at that point. So everyone talks about the 2,000 hour point. So obviously it's the European framework. Everyone says 2,200 hours of active study you can reach conversational fluency in the language. And first what I'd like to say is bullshit, but also I think you reach comprehensible fluency at that point, or at least most things you're going to 100% understand, but there's going to be certain areas, like certain domains that you find hard to understand. So I initially set that goal of 2,000 hours and I was just like sprinting towards it. And at that point I realized like, all right, it's not got me to fluency, but it's got me to a level where I can kind of see the light with regards to Japanese. Like I can see where it's going and I can see the trajectory, my bad. So you just got to continue with it. So even though like it's not good to put all your hopes and dreams onto like one figure, it is really good for motivation. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that, to be honest. And so far I've talked about like the general like my general journey with it, but I haven't really talked about the specific types of study and like what type of AJATT I was. Like that sounds so corny, but we'll go with that. And so basically the first year of AJATT I was very heavy on Anki. That first summer I did 3 hours a day, but then I took it down to a consistent hour a day of Anki. And I was mining a lot as well. So my typical day in third year would look like 1 hour of Anki, purely sentence cards, 1 hour of mining, 1 hour of reading, and 2 hours of active immersion. So like watching dramas, watching anime. And then on top of that, I would normally do 3 hours of passive. But I didn't really like include passive as part of my day because it was really not focused study. It was just like in ears. If anything, it was just getting used to the sounds, but I don't really put much emphasis on that. And then after that, I kind of turned to a more like a natural method of study. So I was just really heavy on like using the language. So I read so much. Like what's interesting is before I started Japanese, I never really was a reader. I could probably count on my hands like how many books I'd read. So yeah, and I was always laughed at in school for like having a lack of vocabulary, and it's still the case. So when everyone heard I was learning a second language, they were like, good luck mate, like you can't even speak your native language. And I kind of agreed with them, but I thought, I knew what AJATT was, and I just had to believe in it. But and I can probably say at this point, like, my Japanese is, I mean, I don't know. Some days I would say it's close to my English, and some days I would say it's nowhere near. But that's just how it goes with language learning. So yeah, I basically turned to quite a reading and active immersion heavy approach. And by this point, I've probably read about well over 50 books. But I genuinely read, like, I think it was that second year of language learning, I probably read about 25 books. And I'm telling you that the first one took 35 hours to read, and it was pure hell. And I don't know why, but I read Ningen Shikaku, so like No Longer Human, which is a really, really hard book, as my third book. So that's so stupid. But I was just brute forcing it at this point, like, get the meaning out of the sentence and move on. So yeah, I was just I was on a mad one, and I still do this. It's like one of my downtimes, like, hobbies. But I basically just I would take my hammock out into the Peak District, like where I am now, lovely place, and just put my hammock up and then read for like 5 hours. I remember one day I read for 8 hours and read a whole book, and I was like, right, I gotta go home now, it's too dark. But I just love doing that. So I think that's one thing that's like really kept me doing Japanese. It's just the passion for it. Like, it introduced me to a love, I know it sounds corny, a love for literature. And if I hadn't started learning Japanese and I didn't know that just reading more gets you better at a language, like, I would never have done that. So yeah. And obviously there's a big debate between different types of immersion and different types of media to use to immerse. But I think it's just like, I think Katsumoto said this as well, but you just have to do what you're interested in. If you're not interested in it, just leave it. It doesn't matter. Like, if you like reading manga, just read loads of manga. If you like reading books, read loads of books. I just happen to like reading books. I mean, I would say the efficiency of books probably quite higher, is probably higher than manga, but it doesn't matter at the end of the day. And it's the same, like, for example, my first 6 to 8 months of learning Japanese, I literally only used Netflix and dramas and animes. And then after that point, I just switched to YouTube, and I didn't really look back. So I only really use YouTube now. I barely ever watch series. And I do agree that, like, I think the hurdle to watching YouTube is so high. Like, it's so difficult to just get started using YouTube, because like the pace of speech is so quick, and it's just such like natural language, whereas it's kind of, if there's a script in shows, it's a lot easier to follow along. I found a pretty good spot here, view of the lake, so I think what I'm gonna do is set my camera up here and just sit down and film, because I'm out of breath. Maybe I'd done about like just over 2,000 hours at this point, and I genuinely felt like comfortable in comprehension. So whatever I read, really, or whatever I watched, I kind of understood like 90+% of it. So I was pretty satisfied with that regard. But I just had this whole complex for the whole time about not being able to like vocalize, or not just not being able to output or speak. Even with writing, like, I'd make so many mistakes, and I just didn't know why. And in retrospect, like, obviously I'm still not there. I still can't say I'm like 100% fluent in terms of output, but I would just say it's just like more immersion. I just always ignored the 10,000 hours that Kat said. In retrospect, I don't know why. I think I just didn't want to believe that it took that long. I always just said to myself, around 2,000 hours and that'll be sufficient. But yeah, I do think maybe it takes more, around 10,000 hours to actually get to complete fluency in a language. But so yeah, at that point we're about halfway through my 4th year of university, and at that point, how long I'd have been studying, maybe like 2.5 years. And I just decided, like, I'm gonna go to Japan. So I hadn't been able to go to Japan with my university because they didn't have like a scheme like that. And actually I'm kind of glad that I didn't, because at that point, say it was like between 3rd and 4th year or 2nd and 3rd year, like, I just wouldn't have been able to use my Japanese enough, and I think maybe I'd have lost kind of confidence in it. So yeah, I decided I'm gonna go for a working holiday, and I thought if I'm gonna go for a working holiday, I want to do some cool stuff. So I came up with 2 ideas. One of them was like, I want to cycle the length of Japan, and the second one was I want to work a job and use my Japanese in Japan. I was at the point where I can probably get by. I can converse, I can get across what I want to, but it's like, it's not neat, it's not clean. It sounds like the equivalent of broken English, but I could at the same time understand like pretty much 100% what everyone was saying. So, and I would genuinely say that's the most frustrating time period of language acquisition or language learning, because everyone thinks you're an idiot, but you can exactly understand what they're saying. And you want to get that across, but you can't because the words just won't come out. It's just so frustrating. And one thing I'll say is like it passes, like it definitely passes. But it goes on for quite a while, because I watched a video the other day that I kind of agree with, and they were saying like most people say you can just gradually start to learn to output, and you'll gradually get better as you go. But it's genuinely like, 90% of the language, and all of a sudden it just floods out, like it all just happens at once. Obviously you've got to keep practicing output, and that's important, but I would definitely say out of AJATTers or out of serious language learners, I'm on the low side of outputting, because I really didn't output that much, and I've always been thinking like, I'm not doing enough, but that's a whole other discussion as well, so I'll get on to that in another video. So I go to Japan and I decide like, right, I'm just going to convert everything into Japanese. Like, I'm going to think in Japanese, I'm going to write in Japanese, I'm going to talk in Japanese. I just really wanted to get to that level. Like, I just wanted to be able to use it as my language. So one of the main things that was good for that is like writing a blog. So I decided I was going to write a blog like the whole time I was in Japan, like every single day. And in the end, it didn't last the full 6 months, but it probably lasted like 4 months or something. So it was or at least 3 months. So it was quite long. And also, as I was cycling from Fukuoka to Aomori, so like essentially the length of Japan, but I can't really call it the length. I wrote a blog, and I probably wrote like 45 minutes a day to an hour. I wrote the blog when I was traveling. And then a lot happened in Japan, and it's something I mentioned in my Crohn's video, but it just set me off, so I wasn't able to continue to write the blog. And I didn't have the time in the day as well, because I was working at a company, and it was a 2-hour commute a day. I was working for 8 hours, 1 hour lunch break, like it was just no time. So I'd normally set off from my place at about 8:30 in the morning, and then I'd get back at about 8:30 at night, so 12 hours in a day. All I was really able to do was immerse, because I could read a book on the train when I was going there, I could listen to audio books when I was walking, and obviously at work I'd have to use Japanese as well. Like, I'd have to use Japanese a lot, but because I was on English support, it wasn't as much as I'd have liked to. Like, my ideal scenario would have been 8 hours of Japanese a day, but it probably ended up being about 3 hours of Japanese, 5 hours of English, or maybe 50-50, which is not awful, but honestly, sometimes I was in that work thinking like, I've come to Japan to get better at Japanese, and I probably could be getting better at home. And I know that sounds stupid because it's not all about that, but yeah, it's a difficult one when your Japanese isn't good enough to just work purely in Japanese, but your English, you can still use your English, because you're really restricted by the jobs you can get at that point. But yeah, so I came back from Japan, and my motivation was genuinely at an all-time low with regards to Japanese, because I felt quite defeated in what happened in Japan. It's so ingrained in my life at this point. Like, it's basically just as ingrained as English is, and also I prefer like Japanese media anyway. Like, it's just interesting. Like, I've heard a lot of people that learn a second language, they just end up losing the love for it because they just get bored of the media and they realize it's just not that good. And I've heard people talk about Japanese in the same way, but genuinely I've never really had that experience. Like, there's been droughts on my YouTube account when I've just been like, what is this shit? But most of the time, that the same would happen in English. So, and also, like, there's so much brain rot in English media. Like, I don't think brain rot's quite got to Japan yet in the same way. Like, obviously there's some stuff, but nowhere near the same extent. So if I go onto my old English channel, I'm like, what? I just feel terrible. Like, if I watch videos on that for an hour, I just feel like my brain is just disintegrated. Whereas if I could watch Japanese YouTube all day and not feel bad. And also, it's two birds, one stone, because like you're also learning the language. So yeah, so I basically continued pretty consistently to consistently immerse. But at this point, I allowed myself to watch English media. Like, if I really wanted to, I was like, so that was interesting as well, because I'd been watching Japanese media only and consuming Japanese media only for about 3.5 years at that point, maybe 3 years. Just full heavy AJATT style. And then I went back to some of the shows that I used to watch, or some of the things I used to watch, like hip hop and everything in English. And I was like, wow, it's really come on. Like, it's as if I was under a rock for 3 years, or I was in some sort of time capsule. So it's almost like a social experiment. But I go back to it, I'm like, oh yeah, Denzel Curry's like, he's doing well for himself. Like, he's released some great albums and stuff. So that was definitely an interesting experience. But I don't regret it one bit, because like, I was enjoying myself the whole time anyway, immersing in Japanese content. And I genuinely don't think like I missed out on anything, because I just caught up within a couple months on the stuff I really cared about anyway. So yeah, that happened, and then I allowed myself to watch English content whilst still immersing quite a bit in Japanese. And at this point, I was investing quite a lot of time into coding, but again, I'll talk about that in another video. So I was outputting here and there. In terms of output this year, so it's 2024, obviously. And since like January up until now, I went through a period where I wrote for an hour, 45 minutes to an hour, maybe every day for like 2 weeks to a month. It's really not that much when you think about it, but at that point I felt like my output had come on a long way. Like, I was able to just express exactly what I wanted to. I posted a couple of things on Hello Talk, and obviously I got a lot of corrections, but they were kind of minor things. Regarding output, also, I did quite a lot of shadowing earlier this year, because I got into a habit of shadowing, and I think I probably continued that for 2 months, just over 2 months, about an hour a day. So I've probably done over 100 hours of shadowing in total, which is really not that much. But I remember Matt vs Japan talking about starting with output and saying like, you only really have to do 10-20 minutes of shadowing, and I can definitely see why he said that, because it's exhausting. Like, especially when you first start it, it's so difficult, like, and all you're thinking is, how the hell am I supposed to copy exactly what they're saying right now? It's just really hard to get your head around. But then you gradually get into it. Just if you fall off, get back on again. It's like surfing, like, just fall off, get on, fall off, get on, and then you find you're able to ride quite long waves, I guess, in that analogy. So it's really worth sticking with it. And I also, one thing I would say is that you don't initially realize how shadowing's helped. So you'll probably think, oh, this has been such a waste of time, like, why didn't I just try speaking? And my accent's no better, blah blah blah. But then if I compared like my output and my speaking before that and then now, like, it would probably just be like very drastically different. So it's definitely worthwhile, but I think it just has a delayed impact, and it's the same with like language learning in general. It's the same with immersion. Like, it's a delayed impact. You'll be immersing all day, every day for days and days and days and years, and then all of a sudden it'll just click, and you'll have one day where you feel like a god, and then that obviously goes away the next day. But like that's what it's all about. But yeah, I'd say like I'd say shadowing definitely has a delayed impact, but it's worthwhile. And then I didn't really start speaking this year until like a week ago, or yeah, maybe a week ago, or 2 weeks ago. So I did a couple italki lessons, and I went to an event the other day with Japanese speakers. But I realized like it's come on a long way. Like, I'm just able to instantly say what I want to, as long as the conversation isn't extremely complex. And even when it's in a complex conversation, like when I was speaking with my italki tutor, we just basically converse about anything. So sometimes it gets quite difficult, and I don't even know anything about politics, so if it gets onto a topic like that, I struggle, but I navigate it and I get around it. So obviously I don't feel fluent at all in those situations. I'm kind of just grasping onto straws and just pulling out some knowledge, or like some kind of constructs that I know from somewhere. But it just means when you have like daily conversation, everything feels so much easier. And at this point the video is probably getting concerningly long, so I'll try and wrap it up soon. But there's two other things I wanted to talk about. So the first one is like when I took the the JLPT N1 last December when I was in Japan. And the second one I want to talk about is like the future, so where I want to take it from here, how I could improve, etc. So first, talking about the JLPT N1, it was like long awaited. Like, how do I put it? I'd had it in mind for quite a while, because I saw that a lot of the other AJATTers had done the N1, and it's not necessarily a rite of passage, but I thought I'd quite like to see where I'm at as well. And I was quite heavy in terms of like reading and stuff, so I thought I'd be quite good at it. So the only thing is, like, you know, Doth, like all of those people, they just were so accurate. Like, I don't think I've ever gotten like 95%, 98% in a test. So I was thinking, I'm gonna make mistakes. Like, I just make mistakes like that. I'll just not read the question properly or anything. So, but anyway, when I was in Japan, I didn't really have any way to revise, but the most revision I did, I guess, is like I went onto one of those sites like Japanese for You or something, and I just did some practice questions when I was like commuting to work. And one thing I found is like the listening, the speaking and stuff wasn't really too much of an issue. Not the speaking, sorry, the reading. But when it came to the kanji and the vocabulary wasn't an issue. But when it came to grammar, I just was getting everything wrong. Like, I was getting like 50% in the grammar and thinking, I'm pretty sure I've never seen that construct before. Obviously I probably had, but you have to be able to tell the difference between like two similar grammar constructs. And in my head, it was like a tekito, like just, it doesn't matter, just use one of them type thing. So I wasn't very good at distinguishing between the grammar constructs. But yeah, I decided to take the JLPT, and I'm glad I took it in Japan because it's cheaper. Like, it's £40 instead of 100, so that was nice. And it was at Meiji Daigaku, so Meiji University. But so went there, and that was an interesting experience actually, because like most of the people in the exam were Asian, and I kind of expected that, but there was like maybe 5 white people. Go in, and there's maybe like 200 people in the hall, and it's quite serious, like a stern atmosphere. I don't even know how to explain it, but I take the test and I feel all right about it. Like, I did what everyone recommends to do, and I did the reading section first, and then did like the grammar and the vocab afterwards, which was a good idea because the reading section's pretty chunky. And it feels like the weighting, even though the weighting's 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, it feels like you can drop a lot more points on reading, so it's important to get that right. Especially because like the last reading question's quite a significant amount of points. But I took that, and then my results were, what were they now? Like I got 100% in the reading, I got 42 out of 60 in the grammar and vocab, I think, and then 47 out of 60 in the listening, or maybe it's the other way around, but yeah, so total it was like 147 out of 180. So it wasn't as good as I wanted to get. Like I wanted to get higher than that, obviously, because it's like what, 83%. But at that point I was like, I've done it. I did it maybe what, 2.5 years into AJATT, so I was quite pleased with my results. And I just was happy that I got 100% in reading. Like that was the one thing, because I had so much belief in my reading. So and if I didn't get 100% in that, it's like, this is my best skill. Like I've just put so much into it. So, but yeah, so I was glad with that. And with regards to like the future, or what I want to do with Japanese from now on, is the honest answer is I don't know. Like I don't know. And also it doesn't matter, because I don't have any regrets. Like I'm so glad that I learnt Japanese, and I got some incredible experiences out of it, some very unique experiences, and I met some great people through the journey. Like even if I was to stop doing Japanese now, I still won't regret it, because like the time I spent during it was great. Obviously there was some times where I just really didn't want to do it. I mean, I remember sometimes like with Anki, I hadn't done my Anki reps for the day, and I'd get back from a night out at like 3 a.m. and just bang it out just before 4 a.m. before it renews, because I just there was no day, I don't think I missed a day of Anki in 1.5 years, because I was so religious with it. But there was it was to the extent of like, not my health, but also there were times I felt so sick, like I just didn't want to do it. But yeah, anyway, so with the future, I would say like, do I want to go back to Japan or not? Only if I have a good reason to. Like I would love to go back to Japan, and I probably will, but in terms of living there, like there has to be a reason. There'd have to be a job opportunity, or I don't know, like a visa opportunity or something like that, and something that would like kind of take me back there, because it's a great place. Like it's a great place to live, but I just don't know whether it's better than what I have here. Like in retrospect, it's a difficult one. But in terms of like my actual Japanese ability and what I want to do from there is, I want to meet more people and speak more Japanese. I want to read more books. I want to watch more videos. I want to whatever. Like I just want to use Japanese more, because I would even go as far to say as like I enjoy Japanese just as much, if not more, than my native language, English. Obviously with your native language, there's that feeling of comfort, and you can kind of relax when using it, because you know you're going to be able to fall back on what you know. And obviously you could make the argument of like, why don't you just get to that level in your second language? But it never quite works, because let's be honest, like you've spent your whole life in your native language. Say I'm 23 years now. Like if you look at the comparison between Japanese, time spent in Japanese and time spent in English, it's incomparable. Even though I put so much time into Japanese, it's incomparable. So you just can't compare it in that way. But one thing I'd say is like, it's fun. Like Japanese is fun to use. It's a challenge. It's like a puzzle. It's still got that novel feeling to it, that with something like your native language you'll never feel. And the way I'd compare it is like, with your native language it just flows. It flows like a river. But with your second language, when you think of a construct or an idea that you want to get across, you've got like 5 different options that pop up in front of your head, and then every time you've got to choose the best option. You just got to grab it and use that. So that's like so much more interesting than it just flowing in my eyes. And obviously when you first start out, you might not have any that pop into your head. And that's why immersion is important, because if you've seen all 5 options 100 times, they're going to pop up into your head. And then so those gradually increase, and it gets more interesting as it goes on, because you've got more options to choose from, and you have to choose the closest one to that to getting your point across. One thing about these AJATT updates as well is, like, up until 2 years of doing AJATT, I actually kept a spreadsheet, and maybe I'll show that on another video, but to me it doesn't really matter at this point. Like, it's because it was everything at that point. I was thinking, like, these are all my stats, this is how far I've got, and like I was trying to measure it all like it's one big experiment. But it's happened in other people's AJATT videos where they start with, like, so stat heavy, like I've done this many hours of immersion, like blah blah blah, this is my current level. But it becomes a lot more open and a lot more personable later on in the later videos. I don't know who it was, like Hypothetical Tiger, that was it was the same. It's kind of like they talk about Japanese as if it's just a language, and I think that's a nice thing. It kind of just it doesn't, it's not stat anymore, it's not numbers anymore, it's just something that you own, or it's part of you, which sounds super cliche, but I think is the case. And one thing that's important to mention about AJATT is the whole moderation argument. And like, I remember one of Katsumoto's articles in AJATT was like, what is all in moderation? It's absolute nonsense, and you should, who's ever achieved greatness via moderation. And I think what Katsumoto said about moderation is probably 99% true, and it's really important to be able to capitalize on your urge or your drive to get better at something. So if you want to put like several hours a day into a hobby, then go for it. But at the same time, like, balance is also very important. It's one thing I've always tried to focus on, because you don't want to get so involved in something that you're not able to think about anything else. Like, you gain this tunnel vision, and everything else in your peripheral vision, is that what it's called, will basically just disappear, because then you'll look back in the future and think, oh no, that was a bad decision. Like, I sacrificed important things but for something that's in retrospect not as important. So it's the same with AJATT. Like, you want to learn Japanese, and that's really important, but you've got to make sure you're having fun with it, and you don't want it to take away from other aspects of your life, because at the end of the day, like, how important is it to be so good at a language? まあ普通に言いたかったのは、もちろん言語習得とかは趣味としてもちろん大事だと思う。本当にいい趣味だけど、まあ全体的に生活のバランスをとって他のところ、例えば人間関係とか成績とかを考えてから言語習得に集中した方がいいと思う。例えばそういう大事なことを犠牲にするほど大事な趣味じゃないと思うし、そういうことを犠牲にすれば多分後で後悔するかもしれないから、もうちょっとバランスとって考えた方がいいと思う。それは助言として言っておくけど、じゃあまたね。